Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a screencast-o-matic presentation and recording for the part of the lesson that has us looking at the history of presidential campaign commercials. This particular reading is from Upfront Scholastic and it's called the 30-Second Campaign. Before we get started, please let me encourage you to open up to today's lesson and to scroll down the correct section. And please remember that your task here is to answer the key concept questions as they coincide for the reading. Let's go and get started, and please remember that you can play any part of this presentation for detail, clarity, or repetition later. The 30-second campaign. Even in the age of social media, TV ads still play an enormous role in presidential elections. Can they be trusted, though? In one ad, a string of grim images of shuttered factories and struggling Americans are the backdrop for the ominous narration, "In Hillary Clinton's America, the middle class gets crushed." In the other ad, a series of dignified images of Clinton meeting with foreign leaders is followed by the narrator's reassuring message, "A steady leader in an unsteady world." With ads like these, both Clinton, the Democratic candidate, and the Republican candidate Donald Trump are trying to present themselves to voters in the best possible light, while conveying unflattering, even frightening images of their opponent. Like all advertising, political ads offer a biased point of view. Just like an iPhone ad is designed to sell iPhones, a political ad is designed to sell a specific candidate. So Americans are seeing a lot of political ads this fall, especially in battleground states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida. But voters everywhere are watching them and debating them, and on social media too. That's because advertising plays such a key role in our elections. Old-fashioned TV advertising is tremendously important, if for no other reason than most Americans don't pay very much attention to politics, says Eric Franklin Fowler of the Wesleyan Media Project in Connecticut, which tracks political advertising. Campaigns are looking for ways to reach less attentive citizens. One of the best ways you can do so is to reach citizens who are at home watching other programs. Political advertising has been around since the mid-19th century, but in its early days, it consisted mostly of buttons, banners, and posters intended to generate turnout at local rallies and polling places on Election Day. For example, here's our first section, Ads on I Love Lucy. That began to change in the 1920s when radio's reach became widespread, but the truly seismic shift came with the arrival of television. In 1952, an advertising executive convinced Republican candidate Dwight D. Eisenhower that the sights and sounds of TV offered the quickest, most effective way to get his message across to voters. His short commercials ran popular shows like I Love Lucy that were a huge hit. Eisenhower's opponent, Democrat Adlai Stevenson, thought such ads were undignified and ran half-hour speeches on TV instead. He lost, and in 1956, when he again ran against Eisenhower, he used TV ads but lost anyway. In 1964, the campaign of President Lyndon B. Johnson, a Democrat, ran what's considered TV's first negative political ad. The Daisy spot capitalized on concerns that Johnson's Republican opponent, Senator Barry M. Goldwater, wouldn't rule out the use of nuclear weapons against America's enemies. That ad showed a little girl in a field pulling petals off a daisy and counting up from 1, and then her voice was replaced by an official-sounding male voice counting down from 10 as a prelude to an atomic blast, which filled the screen with a mushroom cloud. The ad was so controversial that they aired it only once. Negative ads have been used ever since. Even though most politicians claim to dislike them, the simple fact is that negative ads work, meaning they can influence voters to change their minds and affect a candidate's poll numbers, seeing according to the latest poll. But just because an ad is negative doesn't mean that it has no value, experts say. Negative ads invariably have more substantive policy information than positive ones do, so negative advertising may actually be good for democracy, Fowler says. Next here is Clinton versus Trump. So usually the number of commercials on TV for each of the major party candidates is pretty balanced, but in the first few months of this year's general election, ads by Clinton and super PACs supporting her aired more than 100,000 times. Commercials for Trump hit the airwaves just 8,500 times that same span. Trump's campaign hasn't had nearly as much money as Clinton's to buy ads, and Trump triumphed in primaries without them. Instead, he's been relying on Twitter and lots of free media coverage of his provocative sound bites. I would never advise a presidential candidate to be off the air for so significantly long, Michael Franz, a political scientist at Bowdoin College in Maine, says of the lopsided advertising picture. We've never seen anything like this before. It's either brilliant or it's complete incompetence. Clinton's huge advertising edge could allow her to define Trump's image to voters before he has a chance to counter it, Franz says, but on the other hand, research shows that viewers don't remember political ads for that long. So maybe spending money on ads early in the race is a waste, he says. And it's possible that paid advertising is less important this year for Trump because he's been so successful at getting free media exposure. In any event, most media analysts expect Trump to boost his advertising before Election Day in November. It will be up to voters to decide what to believe in Trump's and Clinton's ads. See a close look at two ads below. Al Tompkins, a broadcast media expert at the Poynter Institute in Florida, says voters should always be wary. No candidate is going to come on the air and say, here's a few things I'm not very good at, and I have no idea how to solve these problems, Tompkins says. The bottom line is that it's a sales job, so we all have to look at these ads with a critical eye. But that's our job as a voter. A close look at two ads. For clarity here, here's just how the Trump and Clinton campaign strategies have differed within their ads. In the Trump ad, To America's Economy, the narrator says in Hillary Clinton's America, the middle class gets crushed, spending goes up, taxes go up, hundreds of thousands of jobs disappear. It's more of the same, but worse. But in Donald Trump's America, working families get tax relief, millions of new jobs created, wages go up, small businesses thrive, and the American dream achievable. Change that makes America great again. Donald Trump for president. But here's Fowler's analysis. In order to make his opponent look untrustworthy, the ad opens up with dark, fuzzy, and unflattering images of Clinton, and it then uses a montage of troubled but ordinary-looking Americans, a technique that makes the ad more accessible to viewers, to communicate just how bad things would be with the Clinton in charge. As the ad shifts to Trump's vision, the color gets much brighter. We see a montage of smiling Americans in Trump's America, and classic patriotic symbols, like a happy black family raising an American flag. However, one of Clinton's most notorious commercials is called Myself. News anchor says, "Who are you consulting with consistently so that you're ready on day one?" And Donald Trump says, "I'm speaking with myself because I have a very good brain. My primary consultant is myself." Narrator, while Donald Trump consulted with himself as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton negotiated a ceasefire in Gaza, a reduction in nuclear weapons, took on Vladimir Putin, and stood up against the trafficking of human beings, a steady leader in an unsteady world. Fowler's analysis says, starting with news clips showing anchors interacting with Trump adds credibility to Clinton's attack on her opponent. The images of Trump are very unflattering, a classic technique, and then the ad shifts to highlight Clinton's qualifications. And we see a series of images of her looking presidential, getting off Air Force One and meeting with world leaders, and talking with military leaders. So as you guys can see, the world of presidential campaigns in many ways is symbolic of our media age that we live in. However, and given that this is a civics and government class, it benefits us to understand a little bit more about how the media acts, both in different ways of advertising and also campaign political propaganda. Thank you very much for tuning in, and good luck with completing the rest of the lesson.